Sa mapagpalang umaga muli sa bawat sa atin. Welcome once again to our morning devotions and daily meditations on the words of God. Shabbat Shalom. Today is September 10, 2022, and we jump into our meditation this morning. We're still here on the Gospel of Luke, part number 2, which is the book of Acts, and we are covering this morning chapter 5, verse 21 to verse 29. This event, the background in Acts chapter 5 is that the healing of the layman, then there was commotion, the temple leaders arrested the disciples and warned them not, not to speak in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, whom the apostles were accusing that this temple leadership and the people, that they were the ones who were guilty of the reason why he was crucified. And then not only that, they preached the message that Jesus Christ, whom they have crucified, was buried but resurrected from the dead, which is a very powerful message that goes against the doctrine of the Sadducees, who doesn't believe in the resurrection. So after their arrest, they were placed in the prison, intending that the temple leadership would having a trial on the next day. But the event here in verse 29, in chapter 5, verse 21, we read, "And when they heard that, they entered into the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together and all the senate of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison to have them brought." So they thought that the apostles were still in the prison. But the thing is, the angel of the Lord was sent by God to free the apostles, and then the very next day we find them once again in the temple. So they still observe the Jewish religion, and during the time of prayer, the apostles, after their arrest and freed by the angel of the Lord, went back again to the temple, preaching the message. But when the officers came and found them not in the prison, they returned and told, saying, "The prison truly found we shut with all safety, and the keepers standing without before the doors. But when we had opened, we found no man within." So it was an empty prison. Now when the high priest and the captain of the temple and the chief priests heard these things, they doubted of them whereunto this would grow. So they were in doubt whether this new movement would continue on. Then came one and told them, saying, "Behold, the man whom you put in prison and standing in the temple and teaching the people." So whilst they were in the council, gathered this leadership, then someone told them that these apostles whom you arrested, whom you are doubting whether this movement would grow on and move on, are back in the temple. Then went the captain with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned. Verse 26. So again, the stoning here doesn't mean that it is a form of capital punishment for the Jews, but they were afraid of the stoning because of the growing popularity of this movement, of these apostles with their message and with their miraculous healing powers. So they were afraid of the mob of the people. If they do something against these people, then they were afraid that they might get stoned. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, "Did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in this name?" So even here, the high priest, we noticed that they did not even mention the name. And whose name is that? Of course, none other than the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. "And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine," or with your teaching, "and intend to bring this man's blood upon us." So again, what is the high priest doing here? The apostles were bringing the message, and they were accusing the temple leadership, the Sadducees and the high priest, that they were the ones really guilty. They bore the guilt of crucifying the Messiah, though the Romans were the ones really, and Pilate specifically, were the ones who crucified the Lord Jesus Christ. You are bringing this man's blood upon us. You are putting the blame, you are putting the guilt upon us. So they accuse the apostles of bringing, we are the temple leadership, you should not bring it, your agenda right here in the very present place where we are in the rulership, we are in control, and yet you bring this message, you put the blame, the guilt upon us, blood, ano po. So he was referring to the law in the book of Numbers chapter 35 verse 33 to 34, wherein really blood, where although the temple has blood sacrifices there, but it was the blood of animals. But this time they were blaming them of the blood of the innocent man, which is the Lord Jesus Christ. So blood pollutes the land, and you are bringing this man's blood upon us. But notice the answer, the boldness of Peter. And we entitled our devotion and meditation this morning as we ought to obey God rather than men. Notice the answer of the Apostle Peter. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. Again, it is a fitting reminder once again to all of us who are followers of the Yeshua, of the Lord Jesus Christ. Again, the background, the context is that they said that we ought to obey God rather than man. What obedience, what kind of obedience would this be that would be required of these apostles? Remember, they were witnesses, and a witness should never be stopped, hampered, or hindered in telling and being a witness to the message of the truth of what really happened. And this is the trust, and this is the conviction and the motivation of the apostles. They were witnesses. They saw the Lord Jesus Christ. They were with him. They witnessed his doctrine, his teachings, and they witnessed the crucifixion. He died, but one important thing is that he resurrected from the dead. And they are witnesses, and they should not be stopped. Peter says we ought to obey God rather than men. We remember the story in the Old Testament when Samuel ordered King Saul to kill all the Amalekites. But he kept this, and Samuel says to obey is better than sacrifice. So remember that story. It is better to obey rather than sacrifice. And here, Peter said, we ought to obey God rather than men. Bear in mind, the one most important thing that we need to obey God is that we continue to witness. We keep on speaking. Our mouth should not be stopped in telling the good news, and we are witnesses. So, mga kaibigan, mga kapatid, mga mananampalataya, isang bagay na hindi dapat tayo humihinto sa ating pagsunod ay yung pagsasalita patungkol sa mga na-experience natin, nakita natin sa ating Panginoong Jesus. Nawa, ito po'y magsilbing paalala sa atin na magpatuloy tayong magbahagi, maging witness, magsalita patungkol sa ating tagapagligtas na si Kristo. Marami pong salamat at pagpalain tayo ng Panginoon sa buong maghapon na ito. Shabbat Shalom.